This Saturday, experience extraordinary music under the stars. Join Madison Opera for Opera in the Park, a free concert in Garner Park featuring the best of opera and Broadway. Opera in the Park 2026 takes place at 8 p.m. on Saturday, July 18th. The rain date is Sunday, July 19th. Pack a picnic, gather your friends, and join Madison Opera to celebrate 25 years of this magical night. Learn more at madisonopera.org. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, it's summer, and we want to be outside. The Madison area is full of trails, paths, and outdoor destination for us to behold. Whether you're a runner, walker, or just, a casual mosier, there's got to be a spot for you. So on today's show, we're going to hear from an expert on these spots, someone who literally wrote the book on Madison's best hiking trails. First, I'm here, though, with executive producer Haley Sperling, who had that conversation, to talk about how we're getting outside this season, our favorite hikes, all the things. Hey, Haley.
Hey, Bianca. We're inside now, but we'll be outside soon.
Yes. And maybe outside in spirit. Haley, do you have a favorite trail in the Madison area?
There are a few favorite trails that I have in the Madison area. I am a basic gal. I love Picnic Point. I'm not going to get too deep into that because we get deeper into that later. But the one that I want to call out here is the Cherokee Marsh Conservation Park. It is over on the north side. And it's just such a beautiful, calm, serene place. It has actual covered boardwalks with observation decks, which give folks the view of the upper Yahara River. And it's just so beautiful out there. And the thing that I do love about it too is that, obviously it's outside. There's nature, right? Greenery, trees, but there's also so many native plants and so many native species of insects. And there's always butterflies out there. It just kind of feels like a little swamp prairie land. It's kind of Shrek in a way, but in a good way.
Oh, Shrek is there. They've got to be living there. I totally see that.
And of course, it doesn't hurt that it's right by Culver's too, right? You go get a little walk and then go get a little treat.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this one up. I remember it was a highlight for the mayor of Madison that she was like, how do you enjoy the city? And she had shouted out Cherokee Marsh Conservation Park. I haven't seen that much of it, but I've done a little bit. I've gone to a little area where you can bring your kayaks and canoes and had that sort of peaceful vibe. I want to explore it more. And another note on Cherokee Marsh Conservation Park, I know that the Wisco birder, Dexter Patterson, who's been on the podcast a number of times, one of our favorites, has said that the birding there is fantastic. So I love that one. I'll share mine, which is, out by the Eagle Heights Community Gardens. Of course, we always talk about Picnic Point, so I too will skip that. But yeah, the Eagle Heights Community Gardens, which frankly is a stupendous walk by itself, just walking through there, where they're located right by UW and this rewilding area of prairie and gorgeous wild spaces, is the Eagle Heights Woods. So a 28-acre woods parcel is one of my favorites. I know Andrea highlights that in your conversation that's coming up, Haley. It's just a really special walk. I've gone there in the morning several times. They've got these groves of towering oaks, and it's super pretty during the spring. There's all kinds of flowering plants there to feel connected to. It's also a pretty sacred place for Native Americans as well. There are several Indian burial ground sites at the top of that, but it's sacred for a reason. It's a really special place and a place to get good elevation, which I know that's kind of one of the things to discuss. Does Madison have good hikes? Well, we're going to get into that later too, but elevation being one, that has that. Haley, do you, as we're talking about our urban space that has a lot of green spaces, but in terms of hiking, do you have any hot takes about how to get that hiking fix?
My hot take is that I think that anything can really be a hike, right? Inside, outside, inside and outside, anything can be a hike. And you can, at the mall, hiking at the mall, that can be real, right?
We
Urban
know how to
exploring.
do that.
And I think you can really like clock some serious steps at Madison's many like neighborhood and larger community festivals. Last week we had Fête de Marquette, and I was walking back and forth down McPike Park all evening long and probably clocked a couple thousand steps there. And then this week it's the Dane County Fair over at the Alliant Energy Center. And like, you can bet that there is going to be a lot for you to see and a lot to walk around and a lot to do. And then right after that, there's also Atwood Fest later this month, which folks should definitely come to because we'll have a table. So I think that like a lot of hiking can be found anywhere you choose to look. The same tips still apply. Wear good shoes, drink lots of water, have your sunscreen ready. And that's, whether you're hitting the trail or whether you're pounding some pavement, getting a sweet treat at a festival.
I'm starting to think our team is Delulu. This is reminding me of our debate about whether Madison is a beach town. It's like, well, when you think about it.
I mean, if you think about it, anything could be anything,
anything
right?
Could be. But I really agree with you. And it gets back to that point of the fact that Madison is one of these unique urban spaces that truly has a lot of greenery, so it can feel like you're getting some hiking in. And McPike Park is a great example of that. It does feel like you're getting some nature time and you're getting your steps in. Stop by at Atwood Fest. I want to expand the conversation to talk about trails that aren't necessarily like in Madison, but a little bit outside of Madison, because one of my favorite trails right now is the Glacial Drumlin Trail that starts in Cottage Grove. I feel connected to the wood nymph in me. It's one of the contradictions. I think of myself as a big city person, but just as much as someone who should just adhere to a tree in the forest. And the Glacial Drumlin State Trail, that is a 52-mile multi-purpose rail trail in Wisconsin, begins in Cottage Grove, which is really close to Madison. It has a lot of space to feel solitude and like just actually a lot of space. It's 52 miles. So you can go pretty much as long as you want. And you're walking across bridges over like water areas. You see prairies. You'll be in like full forest. You get so many nature variations on the trail. And I've had a lot of good thinks out there. There are also a lot of bikers that take it because the trail you can actually get straight to Waukesha, basically the Milwaukee area. One of the coolest things that I learned recently is that turns out Dane County, the state of Wisconsin, Madison, Cottage Grove, they're all working together to connect the last missing segment of the Glacial Drumlin State Trail to Madison. So from Cottage Grove, this is the dream. They're basically in planning stages right now. And the website said construction is to start in 2027. So next year, to have the trail begin at the I-90 bridge in Madison, like over by Buckeye, and then extend east to Cottage Grove. So I'm pretty thrilled about that.
That's exciting. That's pretty big.
Yeah. Do you get out of Madison to hike much, Haley?
I love getting out of Madison to hike, honestly, because, as we talked about, we've got our urban hikes here, if you can call them a hike. But I think the real stuff does happen kind of in the surrounding areas. One of my favorites is the Gibraltar Rock State Natural Area. It's about 40 minutes north, right by Lodi. And like, it's this huge natural area with these big, like tall cliffs. We're talking about looking for elevation. Like I don't love a climb. I'm not going to lie. I don't love hiking uphill, but it is always worth it for me to get those views at the end of the day. And there are some stellar views over at Gibraltar. So like definitely recommend that.
I love that recommendation. And we mentioned we were going to talk about elevation. And I was in California recently, and we'll just say that those California hills were kicking my butt. I was guzzling my heart while everyone else acted like it was nothing. I made it, and my partner was there with me, but I said, I have Culver's heart, like my arteries.
Same.
Same. But I also, it made me appreciate and think that maybe I should get out to Devil's Lake and find more elevation. So Gibraltar's is an awesome rec. And speaking about those hills in California, I noticed so many trail runners. How much of a thing do you think that is in Madison? We've got so many great trails. People got to be running on them.
We have so many great trails, and people do be running in Madison. We ran in Madison at least once.
We did. We did. 5K.
5K for Gilda. Love it. But there is actually like a Madison Trail Runners meetup group, and they host runs and different events. Like every Tuesday evening, they do a yoga and trail run at the UW Arboretum. There's actually one scheduled for tomorrow. The event is free, but there is a suggested donation for the yoga instructor's time. And also, the Ice Age Trail is huge for trail runners in the area. And this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about. Some people love it because it is well maintained and relatively flat, but other folks don't love it for that reason. The trail runners, they want to get into the nitty gritty. They want to be going up and down. They want to get muddy and dirty. And this isn't necessarily that. So I love it because it's well maintained and flat, but I'm not that hardcore running 50 miles in the wood type gal yet.
Well, it's been so fun running through this conversation with you, Haley. I'm sure folks want to hear from the expert we've been mentioning in this conversation about trails they can get into. We'll hear that conversation with local author and naturalist Andrea Debink. Andrea literally wrote the book on Madison hiking trails. Check it out. It came out last year. And Haley, you got all the details on hiking, need-to-knows, hidden gems, and more in that interview. That's coming up right around the bend. So stay close and we'll be right back.
Andrea, welcome to CityCast Madison. We are so stoked to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, it's awesome. So you literally wrote the book on Madison's hiking scene. It's called Urban Trails Madison, and we are going to get into a few of those standout trails that you listed. But before that, I'm curious to know, how did this project get started?
Well, it's kind of interesting, actually. It started because the publisher, Mountaineers Books, reached out to me to see if I would be interested in writing a Madison area hiking guide. And they're actually a publisher that's based in Seattle. So most of the guidebooks and the hiking guides that they've done are centered in the Pacific Northwest. So they've done Seattle area, Portland, Bay Area, any major city or hiking area on the West Coast they've covered. And so they really wanted to move more into the Midwest. And they actually had found out about me because I had pitched them with a different idea. They did not want to go ahead with that idea, but they kept my name in mind. And then when this came up and they decided they wanted to expand into the Midwest, they reached out to me and asked if I would be interested because they knew that I was a hiker. I've been writing about the outdoors and about nature for quite a while and have lived in Madison for a long time. So it actually seemed like a perfect fit. So when they reached out and asked, I said yes right away because it gave me an excuse to do more hiking.
I love it. A story of determination. They shot you down, but you came right back and you got to do something awesome.
Happens all the time in publishing.
It's so true. I mean, are there any other hiking guides about Madison in existence? I don't think I've ever seen one.
There are. Falcon Guides has done a couple of editions of one. The last one was published several years ago. So it's not completely up to date because one thing that I've discovered as I've been writing this guide myself is that trails change all the time because of, erosion, construction, just things happening in the area where the trails are being put in. New trails, are developed. So things get out of date somewhat quickly. So the last book that was published for Madison, I think, was a number of years ago. And then another book that I'm aware of about Madison hiking is Madison hiking, but then it's also trails kind of far beyond Madison, all the way to Devil's Lake and beyond. And the difference with this book is it focuses pretty tightly on Madison and the immediate suburbs around Madison.
Local. That is what we are all about here too. So I love that. You are clearly an avid hiker and a naturalist. And so for those of us who are novices out there, like myself included, is there any specific etiquette or unwritten rules of hiking in general that folks should know before hitting the trails?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes up for me that I encountered more than I would expect on the trail is just keeping to the right side of the trail when you're walking.
Sure.
I think some people don't realize that, the same rules like when you're driving a car apply to hiking a trail as well. So keeping to the right, obviously if people are coming towards you and there's not a lot of space, making sure to give people room, especially in narrow areas. And beyond that, I think just being respectful of the general environment, being aware that other people are hiking there with you. I know one thing that's become a lot more common on trails is people playing loud music as they're hiking. And I think in certain environments, if you're in a busy park or there's a lot of people and a lot of noise, that maybe isn't that big of a deal. But sometimes if you're on a trail that people use for more solitude and to get away from things, it's probably a better idea to use your earbuds and, enjoy your music that way, just to kind of like preserve like the environment and the atmosphere for other people hiking as well.
Yeah. So bring your headphones. That is a hot tip. I'm curious too with that. You got your headphones in your bag. You're going to need a comfortable pair of shoes. You're going to need a water bottle. Is there anything else that is on your like must bring list for you when you're going out on a hike?
Decent hiking shoes. And, you can go hiking in running shoes, definitely, or, any sort of like athletic shoes that you would use outdoors. But I think in particular, having shoes that have good tread on the bottom, because you're going to encounter different types of terrain, different types of weather. One thing that made a huge difference for me a number of years ago was when I got waterproof hiking boots and hiking shoes, because especially with the weather we've had lately, we've had a lot of rain. Trails are pretty wet. And sometimes you'll be hiking through areas that are just naturally more wet because they're wetlands. But it's a good idea to have waterproof shoes because that will just really improve your comfort level overall. And just, I don't know, you'll have a better hike. I've done both. I've done hikes where, my feet are soaked, my shoes are soaked, and I've done hikes with waterproof boots or waterproof hiking shoes. And there's a big difference in how much you enjoy that hike.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because your feet are everything when you are out in nature, right? An extra pair of socks can't be a bad idea. And personally, I mean, I love splashing through puddles. Like I said, I'm a novice hiker, but I love playing around in the mud. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah. And that's the great thing about when you have like, waterproof hiking boots or shoes, you're just going to have more fun, I think.
I love it. All right. Well, let's get into that fun. Let's dive into this and talk about some of the best trails. And since we're on the subject of beginners like myself, let's start there. What are some of the best local trails for folks who want to get outside, but perhaps aren't trying to test their survival skills in the process?
Yeah, that's a great question. This might seem like an obvious one to some people that have been around Madison for a while, but I would actually recommend starting out with Lakeshore Path, which actually is Howard Temin Path is the official name of the path. But it's the path that starts at Memorial Union Terrace and then heads out to Picnic Point. That's actually trail number 1 in my book. And part of the reason for that is that's the first hiking trail that I ever hiked in Madison, because I went to UW and was a freshman who lived in the Lakeshore dorms. So that was a very common route, to class, back home again, out to crew practice when I was on the crew team. Like it was just my normal walking route. But it's also a great hiking path because it takes you through some beautiful woods along the lake. It's also pretty level and like crushed stone. So you're not going to need like super rugged footwear or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like a solid cleared trail.
Yeah. And then actually, if you want to go a bit further, the second trail in the book actually leaves from Picnic Point, the beginning of Picnic Point, and you hike out to the tip and then you head around the north side of Picnic Point and do a loop through Lakeshore Nature Preserve. And that's actually a great hike for beginners too, because most people know like that part of Madison, and Picnic Point's a really popular place for people who run and bike and hike. But a lot of people just go to the tip of the point and back.
Sure. I've done that one many times.
Yep. Yeah. Like I did that so many times. Like probably I hiked that for years before I realized, oh, you can keep going, head like around the point to the other side and hook up to more trails over there. So that's what the second hike in my book covers, is that part of Lakeshore Nature Preserve. And you'll go along more lakeshore, through woods, through BioCore Prairie, and then back down through woods. So it's this great loop that kind of gives you this overall picture of that nature preserve.
That's awesome. Do you know how long that loop is?
That particular loop is about 3.6 miles.
Okay.
But again, you could do any part of that. There's also many trails that branch off if you want to loop back and make it shorter as well. So it's a pretty contained space. You're not going to get lost in the wilderness at Lakeshore Nature Preserve.
I love that. Sounds like a sort of like choose your own adventure sort of path because, like you said, I've gone down and back to the tip of Picnic Point so many times. That's like my comfort zone when I need a little reset. That's where I go. But now I got to try going off into those, arteries and getting out into the actual, preserve because there is so much more to be explored out there.
There is, yeah.
You're a mom too, are there good trails out there for families in Madison? I have to imagine that, like you mentioned, Picnic Point, that's a great one for beginners, families included, but anyone's good for folks who might not have huge attention spans.
Yeah. One of my favorite places to hike with my daughter, she's 3 now, but even when she was younger, we would take her to the UW Arboretum because first of all, there's just like that open area through, all the blooming trees. Kids can just hike and walk, and there's not like any defined trail necessarily. But then there are a lot of trails as well. So if you feel like kind of getting out of the more crowded areas of the Arboretum, you can take the trails back through the prairie, through woods, past the springs along Lake Wingra. And that's another trail that's in the book, a different route that leaves from the UW Arboretum Visitor Center and then goes through the prairie, through the woods, does a loop up to Lake Wingra. And it is actually, the route that I have in the book is just one option of so many options at the UW Arboretum. And the other great thing about that is the parking lot and the trailhead are at the Arboretum Visitor Center. So if you have a little one, who needs to use the restroom or you need to do a diaper change or get some water, like all of that is right there, which I've realized is becomes so much more important when you have kids with you. Sometimes if you're an adult, you can kind of just like hack it and deal with it however you need to. But sometimes you just need a good place to change a diaper or get some water for your kids. So that's why the Arboretum, I think, is a great place, especially if you're just starting out hiking with kids for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if you're 3 years old and you got to go, you got to go, right? You can't stop that train once it's started. Well, building off of this, it sounds like we have a really great foundation of hikes going on here. What about for the more adventurous folks out there? Someone who likes a little bit of a challenge, where would you send them?
Well, the great thing about where we live in Madison is that we have such proximity to the Ice Age Trail, which runs mainly to the west of Madison. And in the book itself, I actually have several segments of the Ice Age Trail. The Ice Age Trail itself runs through the entire state of Wisconsin, and end to end, it's over 1,200 miles long. So it's a long distance hiking trail similar to, the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, shorter distance, of course, and just within Wisconsin. But it does pass through west of Madison. So you can access certain segments of it within a really easy drive of Madison. And there actually is a segment called the Madison segment that you can hike. The tricky part of hiking some of these segments of the Ice Age Trail is because it's a long distance trail, you're not going to be hiking a loop. It's basically an out and back. So
Sure.
You either have to have someone shuttle you and drop you off at one end and pick you up at the other, or you just hike to one end and then back again to where you started, which can make for a longer hike. So if you're interested in a hike that's more strenuous or just a longer mileage, you can hike, like a section of the trail, but you end up doing it twice because you're doing it out and back.
For this show, CityCast Madison, we are all about uncovering Madison's hidden gem. And in terms of researching and writing this book, I imagine that you hiked a lot of local trails. Were there any that you found that were really surprising or that were maybe underappreciated, unnoticed, but are like actually sort of a top tier destination?
Yeah, there were a number of locations like that, actually. And it was kind of embarrassing when I discovered them because I've lived in Madison for more than 20 years and I've thought that I hiked on a lot of the trails here. So when I would come across these places that I hadn't actually been before and realize they were awesome, it was like, what have I been doing? How did I miss these? And one of those places is the Grady Tract, which is part of the UW Arboretum, but it's not right next to the main Arboretum campus that everybody's familiar with. It's actually on the other side, the south side of the Beltline. And the trailhead for the Grady Tract, the main trailhead anyway, is at the corner of the Beltline Frontage Road and Seminole Highway. And it's a little gravel parking lot with a chain link fence. And I have driven up past that parking lot more times than I could even tell you. But that is a trailhead for the Grady Tract. And it was not until I started writing this book that I parked there, got out and actually hiked in on these trails. And it's a beautiful place. It is so crazy because you're right next to the Beltline. You hear all the cars as soon as you like get out of your car. But then once you start heading down the trail, you're in these beautiful woods. You're hiking through the Green Prairie, which is a beautiful restored prairie within the Grady Tract. There's different types of forest environments there. And then you can also actually loop around, and the trail leads you to what I call a secret tunnel under the Beltline that takes you back into the rest of the Arboretum campus.
Oh, wow.
And I think you actually end up in Leopold Pines, the Leopold Pines area of the Arboretum. And from there, you can link up with all the other hiking trails. You could actually hike all the way to the Arboretum Visitor Center from there and all the other Arboretum trails. But it's like this tunnel under the Beltline that I never knew was there. But it's on one of the routes that I have in the book where I'm describing how you hike through the Grady Tract. And it was just awesome to discover, okay, I've lived here for 20 years. I've driven by this place. It's seriously hidden in plain sight. And this is my first time hiking it, like when I wrote the book. So
yeah, I was gonna say, you literally uncovered the hidden gem right there that was hiding the whole time. Were there any other surprises out there that really kind of got you like that?
There were a number of them. Yeah, I had been hiking a couple of times at Donald County Park, which is a bit further out. It's closer to Mount Horeb, but it's also in the book because it's such a great county park that is just full of trails. And I think I'd probably only hiked one trail, not realizing the entire network of trails that are there. And not only that, but it is a great foraging place. So if you're hiking at the right season and you're carrying your toddler with you, it's great if you're going when the black raspberries are ripe because you can just pick them. It is a Dane County park, so you are allowed to forage to a certain extent. I mean, there's always like rules that apply to foraging in terms of like, obviously only take a little bit, like don't go there and like clear out the bushes or whatever. But you can, especially in the case of the black raspberries, like pick the black raspberries along the trail. And I actually happened to hike that network of trails again when I was writing the book during the time where there were black raspberries, red raspberries. I think gooseberries were also in season at that time. And there were wild apple trees there. It was just like, I had no idea there was that much there in this county park.
I feel so ignorant right now. Are black raspberries different from blackberries? Or
they are.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, there are blackberries there as well. And they were actually in season slightly after black raspberries. So black raspberries are like a raspberry where like you pull it off the plant and they're hollow on the inside and they're pretty small. And blackberries, it's a different berry species. And when you pick them, they have like a harder center. And they're also larger than a black raspberry.
All right. Well, you learn something new every day. Yeah. You kind of just touched on it now with this trail that's a little bit farther out. But, if people do want to go on like a day-long adventure, do you have any suggestions for hikes that are maybe a bit outside of Madison that are definitely worth exploring?
Yeah. And of course, it definitely depends where you are in Madison. I'm kind of biased in terms of direction because I'm like far west. So I may say something in the east and people think, well, that's actually in my neighborhood. So I have to be a little careful there. But, the furthest hike out, I actually want to take a look at the map here because there is a map in the book that shows you the numbers of each of the hikes so you can see where in the overall Madison area each of them is. I think the furthest hike out that I have, at least to the west, would be Cross Plains State Park, which could be a bit of a drive if you're more central Madison or like East Madison. And it's funny because most people I tell about, Cross Plains State Park, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Like no one has usually heard of Cross Plains State Park. They don't realize it's a state park, but it's actually just off of Old Sauk Pass, far west, beyond Madison. And there's hiking trails there. There's not, there's no campground, there's no facilities, the way you'd find it like Devil's Lake or something, but there's a little trailhead, there's a parking lot, and then there's trails that go through this state park. And then actually across the road from it, they share the same trailhead, is an area that's now known as the Glacial Passage area. And a portion of the Ice Age Trail actually runs through that. So if you go to this trailhead, you have a choice. You can hike through Cross Plains State Park and take the routes and the trails through there. Or on the south side of the road, you can head off onto the Ice Age Trail through that area. Or you could do all of it and spend your entire day hiking.
That's awesome. Once again, it's a choose your own adventure. You get to really dictate the type of day that you have. That sounds so, so awesome. I'm curious too if there's anything, as being the avid naturalist that you are, is there anything that you wish people knew more or appreciated about Wisconsin's environment and the ecology of the Midwest and whatnot? Because I feel like so many times we talk to people and they're like, I don't know, the Midwest, it's boring, it's flat.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, what's your take? What excites you?
Yeah. Oh man, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in the Twin Cities and then have now lived in Madison for 20 plus years. And I just love the Midwest. I love the habitats. I love the plants, the animals. I think it's so far from boring. And I think, one of the things that I appreciate so much about nature here is just how green it is. Like we have so many trees and so many plants and,
Yes.
Especially in the Madison area, there's just like little forest everywhere. We have a lot of trees, and I think you kind of take that for granted until you go somewhere else. I love going out west as well. I love Colorado. I love hiking out there. It has its own beauty for sure. But when I go out there, I totally miss the trees that we have here. I mean, obviously there are trees in Colorado, but just it's not the same sort of like
It's
deciduous
different.
forest. It's just the wetlands that are here, I love. And I think, yeah, that's one thing. Just going back to your question, I wish people would take the time to get to know the types of habitats and plants and animals that we have here because they're pretty special. They're pretty unique to our area, some of them. And along with that, I feel like Wisconsin in particular has a lot of scenic beauty. And I think sometimes we don't realize that, or we don't. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of people who don't live in Wisconsin have cabins in Wisconsin, and want to come on vacation here because it's beautiful. There's a lot of scenic beauty here. And that's one thing I love about, the trails in this book is I think it will really help people see the little beautiful places within the Madison area that maybe you overlooked or took for granted.
That's beautiful. You really got to dig deep and you get to see the beauty on the outside. Thankfully, like you mentioned in Wisconsin, we don't have to go far. There's beauty all around us in the nature. And again, I mentioned, aside from being an avid hiker, you are also the Madison Public Library's newest naturalist in residence. This is a 6-week residency put on in partnership with Madison Parks. And right now, you're about a week into the residency. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have in store for the rest of June and July as part of that program?
Yeah, so we just kicked off the residency, as you said, and over the next 6 weeks or so, there's going to be about 8 different events throughout the community that kind of connect back to the overall theme of my residency. And each year, when there's a naturalist in residence, they develop their own theme for that particular residency. And my theme this year is At Home in Nature. And kind of the subtitle for that is Connect with the Natural Wonders in Your Neighborhood, because this is something that I'm really passionate about, but also something that I've been focusing a lot in my own writing work, because I've been writing books for kids and adults for the past several years. And over time, pretty quickly, the focus of my work has turned to, city nature, exploring the outdoors, the benefits of nature. And I felt that I was able to pull all those interests and all that research together in developing this residency. So many of the events you'll see over the next few weeks relate back to helping people feel more at home in nature. And I think there are so many different ways that people can connect with nature that it doesn't have to look the same from person to person. I think for a long time, I thought that to really be a nature person and to really connect with the outdoors, you have to be the sort of person who wants to go backpacking all the time or go into the wilderness or, disappear from civilization. And over time, of course, that's changed. And I've realized that there are so many different ways that we can each connect with the outdoors. And it's good for us if we do, because there's just so much research coming out, especially in the past few years, about how being outdoors really benefits our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, and we all need it. So some of the events that I'm going to be doing in relation to this residency are a slow botany hike. And that's going to be a walk that we do at a local park. It'll be actually at Door Creek Park on the east side. And on that hike, we're going to learn to identify some common wildflowers and plants in the Madison area using old-fashioned methods. So not taking out our phone and taking a picture and using those apps, though they can be great, but using old-fashioned guidebooks and using our senses, our sense of smell or touch, sense of sight. And then likewise, I'm doing a mindful birding hike where we do a similar thing. This will be at a different city park, but for that hike, we'll be learning to identify birds using our senses and using field guides and direct observation rather than just apps, which, again, those things totally have their place. I use them too. But I think that you learn more and remember more when you're using your senses and interacting with nature in that way rather than just like having the app do the work for you. So another event that we're going to be doing, because I do write for children as well as adults, I'm going to be having a story walk at Olberg Gardens, where one of my picture books, If the Rivers Run Free, will be part of a story walk there. And then we'll also have a story time where I read from the book to kids.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we are going to get outside. We are going to connect with nature. We are going to touch grass.
Yes.
Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time in your busy schedule for joining us. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with your trail buddy? All right, help spread the word about CityCast Madison. Get this episode out to your friends. And we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and thanks for listening.